Hello, everybody. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of Paranormal Addicts Podcast. As always, I am your host, Kent. My guest today is Rich. So, as always, we are going to let Rich introduce himself to everybody, and then we will get rolling.
Okay, hey everybody. I'm I'm Rich Newman, and I'm a writer with Llewellyn Publishing. I've written 6 books on haunted places and ghost hunting, and I'm happy to be here.
All right. So, I always start out with like 2 icebreaker questions. So, the first one is like a 2-part question, and that is, what is your favorite places you've investigated, and what would your bucket list location be?
I would say probably my favorite place I've been is a local place, and you probably know it very well too, is the Crescent Hotel. I've gone there probably 6 or 7 times, a couple times with different TV networks too for their shows, and we always get something fun there, and it's always a lot of interesting activity. As far as bucket list, probably be maybe some of the more like infamous private locations that you can't really get into. Something like the Amityville Horror House, or just have free reign at the Winchester House or something like that.
I used to always say my bucket list location would be like Alcatraz, just because there's not only like the prison history, there's the Native American history and all that stuff. I think it would just be cool. You've seen it a couple times on the TV shows, but that doesn't really do justice to a real investigation. So, yeah.
Did you ever see do you remember the old show Sightings?
Yes, I remember Sightings.
A really cool Sightings episode where they go to Alcatraz, and they have that psychic with him. I can't think of his name, but man, he's really good. He like nails like so much of like ghosts and spirits and stuff that's there.
Yeah. So, I want to give a couple shout outs before we get too deep. One of my good friends and one of the other podcasts here on the Get Hunted Network is celebrating their 1-year anniversary day. So I want to give a shout out to Two Brothers Extreme Paranormal. And then my team lead, Jill, is actually celebrating her birthday today. So I wanted to say happy birthday to Jill. So I also wanted to, I was talking to one of my local rock shops that we have here in Paducah, and they said that your books are actually available there. So I told them I'd give them a shout out today. So anybody that wants to get one of Rich's books can go to the Wild Hair Rock Shop in Paducah on Broadway. They got this book in stock, and I recommend it. It's a good book. I like the way it flows. I'm obviously not a beginner, but I've been doing this for 33 years, so I'm definitely not a beginner. But the way it flows is really good. So I definitely recommend that. So the next question we got is, what is your favorite piece of equipment? And you can't say yourself. We know we're the best piece of equipment. So what's your favorite? What's the favorite piece of equipment that you had to purchase, or was given, or whatever? It had to be paid for. What is your favorite piece of? What is your go-to piece of equipment?
I'm going to go pretty basic here and say it's an audio recorder. I love just really good audio recorders, because 9 times out of 10, when you get done with an investigation, most of your evidence that you capture are usually audio clips, usually EVPs and disembodied voices. So having just a really good audio recorder is always, for me, the key to any good investigation.
Yeah. Scrolling on the bottom of our screen, which I don't know if you can see this, but I'm already advertising the expo, which we just saw, and Rich is the latest addition to the expo, and you're probably the last piece. You're probably the last piece to the expo. So it's scrolling across the bottom. So all right. So this, a voice recorder, an audio recorder is definitely, like you said, it's a basic piece of equipment, but I would even say it's an essential piece of equipment. My team's a relatively large team. We have 15 active members on my team. So that's it's a blessing sometimes, but other times it's like babysitting. But I mean, you can't just join Ken 10 Paranormal. There's a procedure to it, so you can't just come up to Kent and say, "Hey, I want to join." It doesn't work that way. So we do. So if somebody comes to me, or one of my team leads, or even just one of the regular members, they have to do an orientation to begin with. That's the first thing we do, because we want them to understand what paranormal investigating is really like. It's not like you see on TV. We want to make sure they understand what it's really like. And then once they do that, they'll come to a meeting, and then they got to go through training that lasts at least 3 investigations. They're actually trained with our team trainer that we got. So, but anyway, I say all that to say, we have certain equipment that we require everybody to have before they join the team, and the voice recorder is one of them. Your voice recorder and flashlight. Or you have to have your own. I don't expect anybody to go out and spend $600 on Ovilus or $300 on SLS, but you do have to have a voice recorder and a flashlight and a notebook and pen. So yes. One question that I always ask, I usually ask it later, but for some reason I feel like asking it early today. What is your opinion on how the para-pop culture, that's my word, para-pop culture, how do you think the para-pop culture has affected the paranormal field, both positively and negatively?
Well, I kind of associate the pop culture with, television shows and YouTube channels.
Exactly.
I think on the positive side, a lot of the things that we sort of like debated about 10 or 15 years ago, like, for instance, like shadow figures is a good example. Now we have enough like really good YouTube videos of people capturing shadow figures and things like that. Always bring up Nuke's Top 10 as my favorite paranormal YouTube channel. He always finds really quality paranormal clips, and there's so many good ones now of shadow figures and shapes and things that I think it's sort of elevated that to be more mainstream, where a lot of people really kind of debated whether that was a real thing. So I think a lot of stuff like that gets helped by normies talking about ghosts and paranormal things. On the bad side, I would say you just get a lot more posers. You get a lot more people just wanting to slap together a group of like hot 20-something-year-olds, put on some black T-shirts and do a YouTube channel, and they don't know what the hell they're doing, and I even doubt whether or not they're legitimately interested in the subject. But I would say that that's the biggest, downside.
Right. Yeah. To me, the biggest upside is that it's made it okay to talk about the paranormal. You're in Memphis. I'm in Paducah. That I was born and raised in Paducah, and I live in Mayfield now. So I was born and raised not only in the Bible Belt, but in the heart of the Bible Belt. You know what I'm saying? So, and I was born with, hi, Courtney. I was born with the gift. I consider it a gift now. As a kid, not so much, but I was born with the gift where I have the ability to see and speak to the spirits. So growing up a lot here in Paducah, Western Kentucky, Southern Illinois, I had a lot of the people tell me that that I was messing with demonic stuff and that I was going to hell and blah blah blah. So I still get a lot of that, but now I also get. It's one way or the other. I still get that's the devil work, or I get, you mean like ghost hunters, So at least it's made it okay to talk about it, So that's definitely a positive. And like you said, another thing is, the quality groups that we have out there, we've been able to get so much better quality evidence, So that's a good thing. And I agree with you. The negative is you have people that aren't really paranormal investigators, researchers, whatever term you want to use. they just look at it as a way to become famous. Like Zach and Cody, or anybody like that. And I have nothing against Zach and Cody. Don't take it. I would like to have half the money they have, but one of my good friends actually calls them the Spice Girls of the paranormal field, because really they're just using it to become famous. That's the whole purpose. So that's the negative. But a good friend of mine, Sarah, when she was on the podcast, she said this, and when I got to think about it, it's really true. The people who tend to watch Sam and Cody videos, or all these YouTubers screaming it's a demon, the people who watch those videos are not the same people that's going to watch my videos or your videos. They're not watching to see what the paranormal field is actually like. They're watching it to get entertained. So those people, even though in our eyes they're the wasteland of the field, they still serve a purpose, because it is what it is, I guess. So my next question is, I'm sure you've noticed there's no way to get around it. In the paranormal field lately, there's been a lot of drama. Why do you think there's been so much drama, and how do you think we need to go about getting rid of the drama?
I'm actually not sure what drama you're referring to.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I try to avoid drama at all costs, but unfortunately, sometimes I get, especially during the podcast, being public, it comes to me. But we've had. I don't want to go too much into it, especially since you don't know it, because I don't want to give it any more time than it already has. But I mean, we've had, for example, Paracons banning people, and other people.
Wow.
Other people just.
I kind of know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know Jason Hawes was talking about some people accusing him of blocking people out from certain cons and stuff like that. And it was just a bunch of horse crap. This is, you asked me earlier when we were not on camera yet, if I did cons. And this is actually one of the reasons why I don't do a lot of cons, is because it's very cliquey. You go to a lot of these cons and there's 3 or 4 big cliques walking around. And if you're not in those cliques, everyone's just kind of looking at you like you're like competition or something. And it's so bizarre to me. It's just no, it's like we're here for a shared interest and hopefully a shared desire to research the unknown and the paranormal and afterlife and ghosts. I've never looked at other groups or writers or anyone as competing with me as much as just a colleague. So I don't like that kind of drama, just because I think it's useless. It doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't really. No one's being propped up by talking down about someone else.
Yeah, I'm starting. I apologize for that. So let me just say this: I'm like you, and I used to do the Paracons a lot, and I had to take 3 years away from the field, away from almost everything, because I had brain and spine surgery. I've only spoke at one event since I've been back, because I do stutter sometimes, like that. Other people don't notice it as much as I do, but it does bother me. So anyway, I apologize for that. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The issue is people think that they should. For some reason, they think it's a competition. They think somebody's trying to take their spot, and it shouldn't be like that. I get asked a lot, especially being in the field as long as I have, what's the main difference when I started to now? And I tell them, to me, the main difference is when I first got into this, everybody in the field worked together. There was a common cause. Everybody wanted to make the field better than it was when they got into it. They wanted that wow piece of evidence. And nowadays, not everybody, obviously, because not me and you, but there's certain people who think it's a competition. They think it's their way to be famous. So they think that the position is being taken. I don't get it. I'm just like you. That's why my expo, is all about pair unity. I don't particularly like that term very much, but I had a good friend of mine who, I guess he's part of the pair pop culture, if that's what you want to say. But to me, he's actually like my closest friend in the field. We're both from Paducah, and that's Gavin Kelly. And he actually made the statement that pair pop culture is dead. And I don't know if it's dead, but my question is, was there ever really true pair pop culture, or was it just a mirage? Because you have people that don't. There's still people out there that like to work with other people. Like, I'm all about working with anybody. As long as you're not faking stuff, I will work with you. And but I mean, but then you have the people that's worried about their position. So yeah, it's time for the drama to get rid of it. Stop. Just stop it. We're all. It's not middle school anymore. The drama just makes the outsiders look at us like they did back in the 60s, 70s, like we're not a real field, so it doesn't help anybody, So.
Yeah, I agree.
So next question I got for you is, what type of investigator do you consider yourself? Do you consider yourself like a scientific investigator, an old school investigator, a hybrid investigator? Just how does Rich investigate, run an investigation?
I mean, I think the type of investigation I prefer would be probably called scientific, but let's be honest. I mean, most of what we do is it's not scientific to turn on an audio recorder. It's not really scientific to turn on a video camera,
Psychoscience. It's a psychoscience. I don't even know what a psychoscience is.
Yeah, I guess I would term it maybe evidence gatherer. How about that? Because I think my goal, ever going somewhere, is just to get some evidence of what's going on there. When you go to like a place like the Crescent Hotel, they know they're haunted. Lots of people know that they're haunted. You just kind of want to have your own experience and get your own evidence. You know what I mean? And that's fine. I've never thought that was a bad approach to ghost hunting. However, if you're going to do private cases where you have people who are calling you because they're scared of what's happening in their house and things of that sort, I think that stuff kind of goes out the window, because what you're really trying to do in those cases is make the people who live there feel better. So, if they're really being haunted, you getting evidence and things of that sort is going to corroborate, what's happening to them, and they feel better because someone else is seeing it, what's happening to them. And it justifies what they're saying. If they're not being haunted and you're able to show that, even better, because now they really do have the peace of mind of not having to worry about it. They're not haunted. Not all of us are as crazy as we are, that we voluntarily like to run into a haunted place and just hang out with ghosts, So I think we just have to kind of keep our end goal in mind. And yeah, I would say I'm an evidence hunter.
So I guess my team, I have to consider as hybrid, because we do all the old school techniques. We actually have a member of the team that's she's like a master with, like the pendulum, and everything. And of course, with me having my gift, but I like the pseudoscience stuff too. I have all the fancy equipment over here in my toolbox, and like you said, really the difference is whether you're doing a known haunted place or whether you're doing a residential. Because if we're doing a residential, my experience teaches me it's a lot easier to go to the homeowner with evidence and be like, this is what I captured on my thermal camera, or this is what I captured on my video recorder, or this is what I captured on my voice recorder. It's a lot easier to go to the homeowner with that than to be like, well, this is what we feel like's going around here. So having that hard evidence, if that's what you want to say, it makes it a lot easier. But yeah, so
well, and with normies, if we call them normies, explaining one paranormal thing with another paranormal thing is kind of useless.
Right.
I mean, if they're a normie, they don't really know anything about the paranormal world. To go in and say, you have ghosts, and I'm going to explain it with these psychics, to them, that's on equal keel of like, you know what I mean? That's not the same thing as going like, we saw them and here's a photograph,
Right. Right. And, so, yeah, I mean, I personally have nothing against psychics or those people, but like you said, it's not really the hard evidence a homeowner wants. The homeowner yeah. And the other thing that I tell people all the time, when you're doing a residential case, which is what I call them, as a residential, you don't worry about your YouTube videos or anything else, or your Facebook lives or any of that. You're there to help that family. That needs to be your focus. My team, if we're doing a residential, we don't go live. We don't even give the address. You know what I'm saying? We're just there to help the family. That's our focus. And when we and just like if somebody tries to join our team and somebody reaches out to us for a residential case, and we have a lot. If somebody reaches out to us, we also have a procedure to that. So they'll reach out to somebody, and the first thing we do is I personally do a phone interview with the client. I hate that term, but I do a phone interview with the client, and then when I do the phone interview, I actually have a form that I use too. That way I make sure I answer all the questions I need to ask. And, some of the questions are not exactly questions that you would ask somebody. You ask, I'll ask the religious beliefs. I'll ask if anybody there uses drugs. I'll ask if there was any murders there, stuff that you don't ask just Joe on the street, So once I do that interview, if I decide that there's a potential that there is something there and we can help them, then we will set up a in-person interview. And then the in-person interview, me and my two team leads go. And while me and Jill ask the questions, we have the video camera going, the voice recorder, and I'm using the same questions that I used during the phone interview. And while me and Jill are doing that, the third person with us is doing a walkthrough. They're doing a walkthrough with the EMF reader. They're doing a walkthrough with SLS. They're doing a walkthrough with whatever to see what a baseline is. And then after we do that, if we think we can help them, we set up the investigation for the next possible date that we can have it. Of course, if it involves the kid, it becomes a priority, and we're going to do that ASAP. But and once we set up the interview, once we set up the investigation, we do the investigation, and then we'll do the reveal the next day, and then we follow up. Especially if it's something that we have to cleanse or whatever. We follow up with the family. We just don't go, oh, we've investigated it. You're active now. Bye. You don't do that. So we make sure that we actually help the family. So, and it's like Laura said here, it's not always the house or the area. It can be the person. Anything can be active. And I like to use the term. I don't like using the term haunted because everybody looks at it as a negative thing. So my term I prefer is I say it's active. Because just because there's activity there don't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Yeah. All right. So, hi everybody. If you got any questions, hit us up. So the next thing I like to do is I have two lightning rounds. I call them. They're just I ask like questions, short questions, real fast, and just give your opinions or something. The first one we do is different kinds of hauntings. So I, just get your opinion on the different kinds of hauntings. So, the labels that people use them on. So let's start with a residual haunting. And for the people watching that don't know what the residual haunting is, which I'm sure you all do, but a residual haunting is, by theory anyway, is basically like a tape recording. It's just energy doing the same thing over and over again, like somebody walking down a staircase or whatever. So, Rich, what's your opinion of residual haunting? And have you had any experiences with a residual haunting?
Oh, sure. I mean, anytime you go somewhere and they're like, every night at 10:15, the drawer opens by itself and a pair of socks flies out. That kind of like repetitive activity happening on the dot is a good example of that. Whether we want to think of it as like a glitch in the matrix or a time loop or just, like we say, a residual haunting, a moment in time captured by the environment. It kind of comes down to the same thing,
So my only true experience with a residual haunting, of course, like you just said, every place I've went, I've heard at 11:01, so and so comes. But so we have a location here in Paducah. There's a very active location. It's called the Metropolitan Hotel, and it was the African American hotel during segregation, and all the famous people stayed there. All the Negro League baseball players, the Harlem Globetrotters, Ray Charles, Ike and Tina Turner. I mean, everybody. So there's lots of activity there. But one of the famous, if that's the term you want to use, one of the most well-known spirits there is believed to be the former owner. And at 11:01, she walks down the staircase. That's all she does, is walk down the staircase at 11:01 p.m. Well, I've investigated the Metropolitan at least a dozen times because it's my hometown and it's one of the most known locations in my hometown. So obviously, I've investigated it a lot. Matter of fact, up until this year, we always held our National Ghost Hunting Day investigation at the Metropolitan. This year, on National Ghost Hunting Day, is going to be the Expo. So we're not doing the Metropolitan. But after doing it 12 times, I think it's time to do something different. But anyway, so I've never been able to catch the residual haunting. And of course, I've always tried. So like at 10:55, I always made everybody come down, no matter if they was upstairs, downstairs, whatever. At 10:55, everybody stopped and set up their equipment at the stair, and aimed it at the staircase to make sure. So, but not the last time I was there, but the time before last, we were there with the film crew from Belmont University, and we set up all our equipment and we actually captured what looks like her walking down the staircase. That's all you see is the shadow type figure walking down the staircase. The curtain behind the staircase even moves, like somebody walked past it. And that's all it was. But we actually captured it on video. So
sweet.
So that's my residual haunting story. So the thing that I, like most people, I always just took it at face value. And I've been questioning lately for whatever reason. Residual hauntings have always been considered the most common haunting. But I had a guest last season on the show, and they actually brought up a point that maybe residual hauntings ain't the most common, and actually maybe it's an intelligent haunting. That's actually what you're going to talk about now, and then I'll finish my story. What's your take on an intelligent haunting?
I mean, I think you may be right that I think intelligent hauntings are probably more common than just a residual event that happens over and over again. And even if you have a residual event happening over and over again, who's not to say it's an intelligent spirit just not doing it over and over again? But the telltale sign of an intelligent haunting is, is it actively interacting with you? Are you asking questions and getting a direct answer back? Are you asking for a specific thing like move this ball right now, and it does that thing? I probably do think they're the most common. I know that a lot of people like to take comfort in thinking that maybe most of it's just weird activity and actual active ghosts aren't that common, but I probably disagree with that.
That's exactly right. And then, the other thing, you go even deeper into that is, with an intelligent haunting, we know if something's there. They interact with us. A residual, by theory, is not interacting with us. They're just walking down the staircase or whatever. So that could be anything. That could be, theoretically, how do we know that's actually paranormal since it's not communicating with us?
Right.
So all right. How about a poltergeist activity?
Well, I'm not sure that I've ever ran into one in real life. I like the idea of them, but how do we separate a poltergeist from an intelligent haunting where they just like to move stuff all the time? Like maybe it's an intelligent ghost and it just really gets a kick out of moving stuff around all the time, and it's not necessarily, poltergeist. I think poltergeists are technically, I'll go by Hans Holzer's definition of a poltergeist. But, he always said that a poltergeist wasn't a ghost at all. It's generally just psychic activity, usually happening from somebody in the house without their knowledge. Like the infamous, teenager coming into puberty and their mental faculties are going wild and they're subconsciously doing all this activity around the house psychically. That's kind of Hans Holzer's take on a poltergeist, and I kind of agree with that one.
And even Laura just said normally it's a child in the house causing the activity. And, not even like psychic activity, just, they can just accidentally be opening a portal and not knowing how to close it, and that can cause the activity. There's a lot, when you're messing with the paranormal, there's a lot, you can accidentally do a lot of damage without knowing what you're doing. I can't say I've ever ran into a poltergeist activity too, but I think that's a good definition. Or like you said, it could just really, what's the difference between a poltergeist and an intelligent besides they like to move stuff? So why can't it just be an intelligent? You know what I'm saying? So I guess the last kind that we want to talk about, so we can get more likes on YouTube or whatever, is how about a demonic haunting? What do you feel about a demonic haunting?
Well, I don't usually think of it as a demonic haunting because that's usually attributed to one specific religion. But I think of it more of as like what the old school people used to think and say they're just an inhuman spirit, any spirit that was never alive, on this planet, and sometimes they refer to them as elemental as well, like they're just sort of primordial, spirits of nature, sort of a situation. I don't know that I've ever ran into that sort of a haunting either. I actually wrote a book called Devil in the Delta about a complicated case in Mississippi that I did, where they were 100%. What's that?
I have it ordered. It's supposed to be delivered next Wednesday.
Oh yeah. Well, I wrote that as a cautionary tale for ghost hunters because it was one of those weird cases where the owners of the house were convinced, that they had a demonic spirit in the house. And then the more that I investigated, the more, it was obvious that they were having activity happening in the house, but they were using drugs. They themselves were doing things like constantly trying to summon spirits and use Ouija boards and do different sort of circles on the floor and instigate things, their own, they weren't haunted. They were inviting a haunting, and there's a big difference in that.
Right.
And yeah. And So yeah, inhuman spirits. Yeah, I believe they're there. I believe in them. I certainly think they exist. But that's one of your. I think Laura here put on the bottom of the screen. Sometimes you just have a mean ass ghost. I mean, if somebody was an asshole when they were alive, chances are now that they're dead, they're an asshole.
I say the same thing all the time, Rich. And I say it exactly the same way you do. If they were an asshole when they were living, they're an asshole when they're dead. And
Yeah.
I like how you separated the religion from the demonic. I mean, I actually use religion in my investigation because I was raised that way. I actually have a Bible degree from Louisville Bible College. I actually have a parapsychology degree from West Georgia University. And I actually studied demonology under Bishop Long, who is the top demonologist, anymore. And so, I consider myself an educated investigator. So my take on demonic hauntings, they're out there. It's one of those things. I hope I don't have to experience. I hope you don't have to experience. Have I ever experienced a demonic haunting? I say no, but I had an investigation that most people would have probably said yes just to get more likes on Facebook or whatever. I had this case. So in my younger days, I was a pro MMA fighter. Okay. So I fought out of Louisville. I fought for the Bluegrass Mafia Fight Club. So, but I lived on the Indiana side of the river because the rent was cheaper. They called it the sunny side of Louisville, whatever. But anyway, so even though I was, I still investigated back in those days. So we got a car to come and investigate this case, come and investigate this house. The car came from the parents and of the person who was murdered and the grandparents of the in-laws of the guy. So the first thing that was interesting is we probably should have said no because it was still too fresh. The murder-suicide had only happened like 3 to 6 weeks prior to us getting up there. And even in the police report, because obviously we got a copy of the police report and everything before we even went up there. Even in the police report, it said that the husband had lost his job, and while he was lost his job, he was attempting to practice satanic worship. And so anyway, so we decided to take the case because we want to help the grandparents. So we get there, and like I said, it was a murder-suicide. So the first thing that was interesting about this place is driving to the location was basically like a Stephen King movie. We had to go underneath the famous Crying Baby Bridge in Indiana that I'm sure everybody's heard of. I don't know if it's true. I've never investigated. It's one of those urban legends that you always hear about. The one where the mother threw the kid off the bridge and she's supposedly hot. So we had to go underneath that.
I did a whole book on haunted bridges.
Yeah. So we had to go underneath that, and like 3 blocks from there was the house. Where it was down like this country road, and candy corner from the house was this an abandoned cemetery from the 1860s. So it was like a Stephen King's movie. Well, we get to the house, and the neighbors had decided to knock down the house with like a bobcat or a bulldozer or whatever. I don't know what their purpose of that was, but they decided to knock down the house. So we had to climb through the attic window, which led us to the basement. And so we get there, and everything is still just like the cops left it. The crime tape was still there. The blood was still there. And we got there, and it was basically what you thought of. In the kids' rooms, the 2 kids have their own room. there was blood everywhere because the dad killed the kids in their room. So then we get to the master bedroom, and you see where she was killed, and then where he committed suicide, and we actually found his diary, journal, whatever you want to call it, where he talks about trying to communicate with demons and Satan and or whatever. So then we for whatever reason we get our attention gets drawn to the closet. They had like a walk-in closet, and we saw that there was a piece of the carpet that was cut in a square. So we peeled it back, and we had to peel back the carpet and the padding. And when he peeled back the padding, he had attempted to make a pentagon in the closet. So we got lots of activity. Where I say it's demonic, I won't say it was demonic. Definitely like an evil presence there. But obviously the guy was a dickhead because he killed his wife and kids. So,
Right.
he could just, so once
that's
again,
neat enough, right?
right. So once again, if you were a dickhead when you were alive, you're going to be a dickhead when you're a spirit. So, all right. So the next round of speed round is we're going to talk about different kinds of locations you can investigate, and you give your opinion on whether you like to investigate them, if you've ever investigated what you found there, and and there are some categories that are close, but they're still separate. Like I'll talk about jails and prisons separately, and I'll talk about hospitals and asylums separately. So let's start out with cemeteries. What do you feel about investigating a cemetery?
I only really have gone to cemeteries if I was invited specifically for something. There's a pretty famous one right outside Memphis in Atoka, Tennessee, that is known for having some sort of a portal and a non-human entity there. And we've had some really weird experiences working there. But and I've gone to the famous churches or cemeteries in New Orleans, the St. Louis cemeteries, and with Fuji TV from Japan. They did a whole show on it. I've been shooting with them for about 4 years off and on, something like 27 episodes I've done with them. And they were really keen on it. But otherwise, I don't really go to cemeteries unless they just ask me to come there for something.
So I guess I got kind of a unique take of cemeteries for somebody in the paranormal field, especially for somebody who's been doing it as long as me. I'm like you. I'm not big on a cemetery guy because to me, I've seen some cemeteries that are haunted, but to me, most cemeteries are just cemeteries. The people didn't live there; they didn't die there. So why would they still be there? With that being said, we do have a cemetery down here that we investigate quite regularly. But prior to being a cemetery, it was a basic training camp for the Confederacy. And 5,000 soldiers died there of disease before they even went to battle. So you have that before the cemetery. And then once it became a cemetery, there's a witch's grave there. And, for the people who don't know, back in the 1890s, 1910s, when they buried a witch, which usually wasn't really a witch, but when they buried a witch, they either put a gate around the grave or they put a log chain on the grave to keep the witch from coming back. Well, this grave used to have a log chain. So she wasn't really a witch. She was actually a Cherokee medicine woman. But back in the 1890s in Western Kentucky, you was either a Christian, and if you wasn't, you were a witch. So that's what, and so we investigate there. And otherwise, like you said, I wouldn't go to a cemetery unless I was invited, and unless I was looking for a specific spirit. Because otherwise, if there is anybody there, that's their peaceful place, so it shouldn't be disturbed. So Laura said I had a portal open to me the other night and caught it in a video. Laura captures some really good videos. She really does. She captures a bit of video. Yeah, she's like a magnet to that and magnet to stuff, and she always captures a video. I'm always amazed at what she captures. So, all right, so we did cemeteries. How about schools? How do you feel about investigating the school?
I'm cool with it. I just haven't had it pop up a whole lot. I did a ghost hunting class I would teach at University of Memphis for a while, and we would do a little tour of haunted places on Memphis campus that were supposed to be haunted, and that was a lot of fun. And then there was a video on YouTube that went viral of a school in Ireland that was having like these weird things happening in their hallways and chairs moving all up and down the halls and books flying around. And so I went with Fuji TV from Japan to Ireland, and we actually investigated that school, and that was a lot of fun. So that was pretty interesting. But otherwise, schools don't pop up a whole lot for me. But I'm cool with them.
So yeah, I have nothing against schools. Like you said, I've never had all that pop up with me. I think with schools, you have to separate like an urban legend from what's really happening. Because, every school you go to, even like my kids are in high school. So I got 3 teenagers, Rich. So, pray for me. So, and the youngest one's a girl, and she's very pretty. I remind people all the time that I was a professional MMA fighter, and as a paranormal investigator, I know where to hide the bodies when nobody looks. So, but anyway, so like every school you go to, you hear, oh, somebody hung themselves in the bathroom, so we have a ghost here. Mm-hmm. Most of that's bullshit. I mean, let's be honest. But I mean, there are some real ones there. Like I would actually like to investigate my old high school. My old high school is now a middle school because the consolidation, because they consolidated into McCracken County High School. But my high school was actually the location of the first. Not the first ever, but the first of it was the first high school shooting to set off Calibi and all that stuff. It was actually pre-Calibi. I went to Heath High School in Paducah. So I would like to investigate it because, just thinking there has to be something from the shooting still there, So mm-hmm. I think that would be a good investigation. But like you said, it really don't come up very much anymore. I mean, you can go to Zach and Cody's if they've tripled the price to investigate if you want to, but really it just don't come up that much anymore. So
how about also what you were talking about with every school having its own urban legends, mm-hmm. The same thing applies to old theaters. Almost any old theater that you'll go to will have a ghost story of some sort, right. And I think I've only ever been to like one theater where something actually happened,
Yeah, same here. I've been to several theaters because, they all have stories. And usually you can go to theater, you can investigate a theater for a decent price, So the only one that I've really ever had anything happen to was at the Rose Theater up there in northern Kentucky. We have a theater down here in Carolina that's now abandoned that I would like to investigate because I've always heard lots of stories about it, but other people were like, there's nothing there. But I mean, anybody that knows anything about Cairo, it's a living ghost story. It was supposed to be a big city because it was right on the river, and it was actually supposed to be bigger than Paducah, which is the biggest city around here. It's and it was actually General Grant's headquarters during the Kentucky invasion of the Civil War. And he actually visited there twice as president. So, I mean, it used to be a big deal. And then they had racial riots that destroyed the town. The town never recovered from it. So, like, during the Civil War in the early 40s and 50s, it was probably a town of like 60,000 people. And now it's a town of 3,000. So it's a living ghost story. It just has a lot of history. And I've been lucky enough to investigate some locations. The location that I want to investigate the most there is in its heyday, Carroll actually had what they called a millionaire's row of houses. It was like 5 mansions in a row. Only 2 of them still stand. One they've turned into a B&B, and they don't even want to talk to you about paranormal activity, even though it's there. And the other one's called Magnolia Manor, where Magnolia Manor is like historical site now, uh, and I want to get there so bad. And I've tried to use my connections because my uncle used to be mayor of the town, so I got some pretty good connections. But they had a team that came in from southeast Missouri, Sikeston, during the COVID thing because they needed money so bad. They let the team come in and they did some damage to the location, so they won't allow teams in there anymore. But I'm still trying because that's where General Grant, that's where President Grant stayed at the 2 times that he came to Cairo as president. So I think that. But anyway, so how about hospitals? How do we feel about investigating a hospital?
Well, usually those are going to be defunct hospitals, not an operation. I mean, I've never been to a hospital with actual people working in it where they would actually welcome ghost hunters. But, I mean, again, it's just one of those that never really pops up a whole lot. But I've, been to Waverly up your way a few times and Trans-Allegheny and a few of those sort of the more well-known places that are haunted hospitals. But just around here, I've never really had it pop up.
So, yeah, so hospitals in operation, I guess, would be an interesting thing. I mean, you'd be dealing with like patient rights issues, everything. Interesting story though. My father-in-law, who is a skeptic, and he's a Baptist preacher, first of all. And I'm talking about like old school Baptist preacher, and he's just a skeptic. Strangely enough, he believes in aliens, but he has an issue with like ghosts. But anyway, so he was in the hospital for a procedure, and he texts me and he's like, "Kent, you need to come up here and investigate my room." He's like, "I got a ghost." So, but anyway, we going back to Cairo. Cairo has a abandoned hospital, and the structure is still fully standing there.
I think all of Cairo's abandoned, right?
Yeah, and
I mean,
most
it's pretty
of it,
much a whole abandoned town.
It is. When you come up here for the expo, if you come up Friday night, I'll put you, me and you will go to Cairo and see some of the places. I'll take you to the place I'm getting ready to talk about. It was called it was known as St. Mary's Hospital when it was in operation, but it actually closed down in 1988. So that's how long it's been closed down. So obviously it's been gutted. No wires, no breaker boxes, nothing. We investigate it quite often. I actually used it as my training location for my team. So but we were there one time with JB Coates. I don't know if you know JB, but she's from Tennessee. She's an author too. But so JB's thing is whenever she does an investigation, she likes to go live. That's her thing. So we were investigating the hospital, and so this wasn't my favorite investigation at the time because I was having to play guide, and like I like to investigate, but we had 2 other teams with us, so I was having to show everybody around, and but she decided to go live on the 3rd floor, which the 3rd floor is an interesting floor anyway, because on the west wing you have the hospice ward, because as most people realize is back in those days, they didn't have they didn't send people home on hospice. You stayed at the hospital. Nowadays they send you home with a nurse, but back in those days, you were in the hospital. So the hospice ward is on the west side. In the center, you have the maternity ward, and then on the east side, you have the psychiatric ward. So this is just an interesting floor. Well, we were on the psychiatric ward exploring, and the story about the psychiatric ward, which I know is true because my grandfather was chief of police in Wycliffe, and in those days, if you were chief of police in Wycliffe, which is right across the bridge, your jurisdiction included Cairo. Everybody just helped each other. So the story goes that there was a white guy that had been sentenced to the psychiatric ward because he was found guilty of raping. It was a black guy, and he was found guilty of raping a white girl. This really, as history tells, he didn't actually rape them. They were actually in a relationship. But in Cairo, back in those days, black guys didn't date white girls. Nowadays, that's all you have, so you have to. But in those days, it was frowned upon. So some of the staff took it. Some of the police officers took it upon themselves to eliminate the guy. It was ruled as suicide. But anyway, so that's the story that goes. So anyway, we're investigating that point, and JB decides to go live, and she's doing her thing, and I'm just standing there in the background listening to her talk. And as she goes live, I get a big scratch across my face, live on camera, just a scratch. So obviously, there's something there. Once again, it's not demonic; it's just an asshole. So that was interesting. And then on that same investigation, after everybody left that floor, I stayed back with two of my team members, Dennis and Denise, who have to be husband and wife. Well, they were standing there, and I decided to take a picture with my thermal camera. So one thing I like about thermal cameras is, thank you, Darren. One thing I like about thermal cameras is you can't fake a thermal camera. You either get something or you don't. So I decided to take a picture with my thermal camera. And like I said, there's only 3 people on the floor at this time, me, Dennis, and Denise. So I take a picture with my thermal camera, and you see Dennis, you see Denise, but in between Dennis and Denise, you see a 6'2" heat signature that's in the shape of a human. There's nobody else on the floor. You can't, you can't dismiss that kind of stuff. So I love that hospital. So yes, hospitals are a good place. Okay, so we move from hospitals. You already mentioned Waverly, but let's go to asylums. How do you feel about an asylum?
It's just kind of like the hospital. If it's like, a place like Waverly or Trans-Allegheny where, their function is to be open and serve ghost hunting, I'm cool with it. It's just, as we know, like out here in the wild, you don't run into a lot of homes for the mentally ill that just welcomes in ghost hunters, especially if they're actually still functioning. So,
right. Yeah, that's just like
so it's kind of the same as hospitals.
We have a state hospital here in Hoptown, as we call it locally, but Hopkinsville. It's a state hospital, and it's known to have activity. But since it is an active hospital, obviously you can't just go and investigate it. I do have a good friend, Steve Asher. He actually got investigated, and they actually let him write a book on it. But usually you don't get to. So, yeah, I'm pretty much the same thing about asylums. Penhurst is actually on my bucket list because I've never been to Penhurst, but I would love to go. So, yeah, one thing I tell people when they do asylums, though, they have to watch calling a spirit evil or demonic just because they grab you. Because when you're dealing with asylums, which you have to remember, some of those people couldn't speak or hear. So them grabbing you could just be them trying to get your attention. So, okay, how about prisons and jails, Rich? How do you feel about investigating prison and jail?
I mean, this is kind of the same kind of category, but I think the only really big prison I've been to is the one in Philadelphia. I don't remember the name of it. It's one of those kind of popular with a ghost hunting crowd kind of prisons. I did that one with Fuji TV, and it had a lot of really interesting stuff in it. I think it's the prison. It was on a pretty. If you were a fan of ghost hunters, you brought up ghost hunters earlier. If you were a fan of ghost hunters, that's the famous Dude Run episode. Where they went to the prison, and I think it was Brian Harnwell, like just says, "Dude, run!" and they run out. Then they had to live it down for 3 years. That was a cool prison, and I've been to a couple others that are in one of the books I did called the Ghost Hunters Field Guide. I went to a lot of prisons, so but it's kind of on the same level. You're not going to have a lot of local cops call you up and be like, "Hey, man, come out here and investigate our prison." Like, it just doesn't pop up too often.
Yeah, so I guess the biggest known prison that I've been to would be Brushy Mountain there in Tennessee. And I was actually kind of, I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but I didn't get as much activity as I thought I would, especially for the price, because it's an expensive investigation. And as much as it's was made out to be, the the most activity I did get, though, believe it or not, was in the mess hall, the cafeteria, whatever you want to call it, and that kind of surprised me at first. But then when I got to thinking about it and analyzing it, if that's the term you want to use, it kind of makes sense because, that's actually where the most interaction happens between everybody, because when they're in their cells or whatever, they're pretty much alone, them and their roommates. Yeah. So all the interaction would be in the cafeteria. So, like you said, you're not just going to have your jailer down the street car and say, hey, come and investigate this. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about some of the kinds of equipment we have nowadays. What I tell people, they have to realize with most of the equipment we have, it wasn't originally designed for the paranormal field. Somebody smarter than me decided, hey, that would work in the paranormal field, so they adapted it to the field. I mean, for instance, let's start out with the SLS camera. The SLS camera started out as a Kinect video game system. It sucked as a video game system, but somebody noticed, as the theory goes, somebody noticed that the camera was picking up people walking across and wasn't there. So somebody smarter than me decided, hey, we can use that in the paranormal field. So they adapted to the paranormal field. What I like to tell everybody, no matter what kind of equipment you use, you have to learn how to properly use the equipment. You have to learn the positive and negatives. You have to learn what kind of false positive it gets. And then it can be a useful piece of tool. With my team, whenever we test a piece of equipment, we use it for 5 investigations before we decide whether to add it to our toolbox or to discard it. So anyway, let's talk about the different kinds of equipment. Sound good? So let's start with, since I've already mentioned it, let's start with SLS camera. What is Rich's take on the SLS camera?
I've never used one. I'm pretty old school. I pretty much stick to night vision cameras. What is it? The one that does UV and night vision at the same time. I forget what it's called now. Full spectrum. Do the full spectrum and night vision, and good audio recorders. And I do like EMF detectors and digital thermometers. They're really good for just to verify if something's happening around you and get a quick reading and that sort of thing. What's funny is I did a documentary about haunted Civil War places called Ghosts of War about 12 years ago. And at the time, Bill Chappelle had just started making gear for the guys in Ghost Adventures. And I had ran into him at a Paracon. And so he gave me some like weird contraptions, to take and use out. And I always kind of just thought they were more entertainment than anything I would get any sort of serious evidence out of, with one exception. He did have a cool device called the Paranormal Puck. And you could plug it into your laptop and put it out there. And it did have it would tell you changes in EMF fields, changes in temperature, and that kind of thing in real time. And I thought that was really cool. But I never used the speech options on any of his gear, where it would make the, book. You're sitting there and something's like closet, or just like says a random word kind of a thing, So I'm pretty old school and pretty boring with gear.
Right, there's nothing wrong with old school. My nickname my nickname apparently is the OG of the paranormal. I don't know if that's a compliment or what. So I mean, what I tell people with the SLS, you just have to remember to use it properly. I mean, the SLS is not designed. You see on the TV shows that they carry the SLS around. It's designed to be stationary. So that's if you use it right, it can be a useful piece of equipment. I was actually watching Destination X last night, and they, I don't know, they were in a forest in France looking for werewolves, and they, I don't know, Rich, it's not my show.
I'll go.
So, I'd go too. So anyway, so they decided to use the SLS, and which I guess that would work. But they start walking with it, and I'm yelling at the TV. My wife thinks I'm insane, and so yeah, as long as you use it properly, it kind of goes back to the whole, you have to know how to use everything. So like the Ovilus, obviously, you don't use Ovilus. I don't have an Ovilus. I don't have the Ovilus for a couple of reasons. One reason is it costs $600.
Right.
That's reason number one. Reason number two, it has a word bank in it. So so it just shoots off random words that have nothing to do with the investigation. So so those are my two issues. Now I do have a device that's similar technology. It's called a Paratic VM5. So which is not as fancy of a name as the Ovilus, but it actually works a lot better. So I've used it for several investigations. And what I like to do when I'm in investigation, when I'm testing out new equipment, I like to use it with something else. So I'll have my Paratech with my voice recorder and my spirit box. And if they get similar answers, I know I might have something. So I've used it several times. My last investigation with my team was actually January 18th and 19th. It was actually my birthday, and we spent it at the Monroe House in Indiana. So that's actually what we did for my birthday. I couldn't think of a better way to spend my birthday. Can you think of a better way to spend my birthday? So we're there, and my newest team member was with Seth. He was with us, and he was with us, and he had just bought a portrait, whatever it's called. It's another, it's another thing that supposedly takes the spirit's words and makes it in English. So he had a different one than me, and he had just got it, so he was excited about it. So we thought, hey, the Paratech and the Portratech, or whatever it's called, they would work good together. You know what I'm saying? But really what happened was the Paratech showed that the other thing wasn't making any sense. We actually turned it off in the middle of the investigation because it was just giving random stuff. Now, with that being said, if it was a different investigation, I might have been able to take time and make some adjustments to it, and it may have been useful. But I'm not taking time out of investigating the Monroe House to adjust equipment. That's not what I'm doing with my time. So interesting thing with the Paratech. So at midnight, which is actually my birthday. So at midnight, we decided to go live from the basement because the basement is supposedly where the evil entity, the demonic entity, whatever you want to call it, that's supposedly where that lives. So we get down there, and I decided to go live, and we have our voice recorder going, we have our video camera going, and my newest piece of equipment that I have is an Apple Box, which is designed by Ghost Gear. It's basically a fancy yes/no thing, but but Rob has taken out like all the force pods. It's actually a really cool thing. The thing is, if you use the voice option on it, it's Dave Schroeder's voice. So hearing Dave Schroeder's voice in dead silence at like 2:00 in the morning kind of freaks you out. So matter of fact, I now call Dave Schroeder the voice. That's now his name. I don't even call him Dave anymore. He's just the voice. So anyway, so we're down in the basement. We're using the Epibox, the Paratech, the voice recorder, the Spirit Box. We're videotaping it, everything. So we're down there, and I started asking random questions. And so my way of investigating, because I think it's really the only way to work, is you have to make the spirits feel comfortable with you. I'm explaining everything to him. I'm talking to him. So we get going, and I'm asking him, the normal questions anybody asks. I asked them if they died on the property, and they said yes. So I said, "Did you die in the house?" Because that's a different thing and a little bit more important. So I asked him if he died in the house, and he said yes. So I was like, "Okay, how did you die?" I was like, "Did you die by gun? Were you shot?" And this response was no. And anybody that wants to watch this, you can watch our video on YouTube, Ken 10 Paranormal. It's on the newest video. So anyway, so I asked it if it died by gun, and it said no. So I asked it if it was physically killed. Was it hung? Was it strangled? Were you beat to death? And its response was no. So at this point, I was a little bit confused because it told me it was killed, but it wasn't shot or physically killed. So I was like, so that's exactly what I said to it. I was like, okay, I'm a little bit confused here. You said you were murdered, but you wasn't shot or strangled or beat to death. I'm like, so how was you killed? And the response I got was fire. That's exactly what he said, was fire. And anybody that knows the history of the Monroe House, it actually burnt down like 5 times. So that was actually a very appropriate answer. And also while we were live, I didn't hear it live, but one of my team leads, Dennis, he didn't get to go with us to the Monroe House, but he was watching it live, and he heard a growl during the live. And once I went back and reviewed the video, you could definitely hear the growl, and it's actually on our video on YouTube. So yeah, it was an interesting investigation. Laura says parents do not want to be reminded on how they die, so she avoids. I don't know if I completely. I don't disagree with that, but I don't completely agree with it either. So when I'm talking with a spirit, when I'm communicating with a spirit, my goal is to help the spirit, whether it's to tell their story or whether it's to help them cross over. So sometimes that requires knowing how they died, especially if you're trying to verify that they died at that location. So I think that's case appropriate. I don't think there's really there's not a rule book to investigating. You can't say, don't do this, don't do that. It's more about experience. And yeah, because I don't think you can exactly avoid that question. Some spirits, I've ran into some spirits who didn't even realize they had passed. They just thought they were still there. And that was actually an Octagon Hall. And, yeah. In the case of the Monroe House, I think it was important to know how they died, to know that they were to know it was actually related, whether it was related to the land or the house. Because when it comes to the Monroe House, nobody really knows why there's activity there. There's just always been there. I mean, there's theories. Maybe it was on an Indian burial ground. There's all kinds of theories. So I think it's important to know whether it's related to the house or the land. I mean, that's my take on it anyway. What do you think about that statement, Rich? Do you think you should avoid asking a spirit how they died?
I don't think I avoided or necessarily try to ask it. I kind of agree with you on, there's not really, a 100% rule book of how to do every single, haunted place on the planet. Sometimes it's a necessary question. Sometimes it just doesn't come up. I think, but so much of a haunting is tied up in the history of the place that sometimes there's a tragic event that's associated with that location. And so it becomes sort of like unavoidable to ask, because if they died as a result of this tragic event, even if you're saying, were you here when the big battle happened, sort of thing, you're already kind of getting into the realm of maybe what happened to them, So right. I don't know. I mean, I see what Laura's saying, and I think, it's more, for me, it's more disrespectful to come in and be one of those people that's like, come on, do something, yo wimp, yo wussy ghost. Like the people who go in like just trying to antagonize, and
provoke,
get something going. I think if you're respectful, nothing's off the table.
And I completely agree with that. Matter of fact, that's one rule I have. Is actually doing my orientation whenever new people join. We don't allow provoking. You have to respect everybody. You got to respect the property. You got to respect the owners. You got to respect the living, the not living. You got to respect everything. One thing that you see on the shows and all that stuff, you see, oh, we're going to help the spirit cross over. Well, what people need to realize is the spirit can actually cross over whenever they want to. There's something that's keeping them there, but they're choosing that. We can't cross people over. We can help them. We can show them the way. We can give them a little push there. But bless you. But they can actually cross over whenever they want to. So yeah. Respect is really what it's about. Yeah, like I had a case one time. It was a residential case. So unfinished business is usually what it is. It was a residential case, so I'm not going to go into details about where it was or who the family was or whatever. But we get there, and it was actually one of the locations I've ever got that activity just started like that. Like the spirit box started going off right away and everything. But anyway, so what we finally figured out was the location had always had activity, but there was foster kids that had been there, and they had decided to play with a Ouija board. I'm not an anti-Ouija board person, so I'm not saying that at all. But like everything else, if you use a Ouija board, you have to know how to use it. If you use it wrong, you can open portals and stuff, and if you don't close them, that's when it becomes an issue. And that's what happened here. They were playing with and not doing what they were doing, so they opened some portals. So anyway, we get there, and what we found out was, and we was actually able to verify all the information that we found with the local newspaper. So that was just like an awesome moment. What the spirit told us, the family was worried that it was like a demonic evil spirit. Well, so we were asking the spirit that, and what they told us is they wasn't evil or demonic. They was mischievous. That was the exact word they used, was mischievous. Well, as you know, that's not a word we use nowadays. So that was kind of interesting. But what come to find out, it was a teenager. And come to find out they had drowned in the flood in this town. And they had drowned with their mom and their mom and their stepdad. That's specifically what the spirit said. Mom and stepdad. So we asked them why they were still there, and they told us that that their mom and the stepdad had crossed over, but they were afraid. So anyway, so we was like, you can cross over whenever you want to, so you can go be with your mom and whatever. So we helped them cross over. So then we went to verify all this information with the newspaper, and we was able to locate a newspaper from 1893 that matched the spirit's name he gave us, matched the fact that he drowned with his mom and his stepdad and everything. So it was just like an awesome moment. So it's really all about respect. So we are actually, over time, which is okay. I actually go overtime like every week, Rich, so it's no big deal.
Mhm.
But I do want to get off here because my friend that I told you that was having his anniversary show actually started
Mhm.
16 minutes ago. So I don't want people
Ah.
to have to choose who they watch. So let everybody know what Rich has got going on, how to get a hold of you. Let everybody know that you're going to be at the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo, so they need to come and see you. All that fun stuff.
I mean, I'm easy to find. I have an author's page on Amazon, on Llewellyn Publishing's website. The books are all out there. You can come out and see me at this con, I guess.
Expo.
Expo.
We're going with Expo because, as we discussed earlier, Paracon has become such a negative thing. So I thought Paranormal Expo sounded more positive. All right,
Gotcha.
guys. Thank you for tuning in. Rich, I will send you all the information about the expo, and I will send you my Facebook page link so you can send me a friend request because I don't know why it's not working when I send you one. So we'll get this taken care of one way or the other. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Next week, guys, my guest is actually going to be the Two Brothers Extreme, which is actually the podcast celebrating their 1-year anniversary day. They're going to be my guest next week. So everybody, if you didn't join us from the beginning, check out our YouTube page. Give us a like and follow us. Rich, again, thank you for being on, and I will talk to you here in a few so we can get all this stuff going. And soon, I got too many buttons on my thing. Here we go. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in.
All right. Thanks for having me.